The Innovators Network.
Welcome to the Killer Innovation Show, the longest continuously produced podcast in history. Each week, Phil McKinney brings you the insights and strategies to amplify your creativity and innovation skills. Here's your host, Phil McKinney.
This last week, my wife and I were on our Facebook portal with our grandkids. Now, I've got 5. I've talked about this in the past. And a number of the grandkids wanted to show us artwork that they've done. They like to do dance party where they show off their new dances. And I was sitting there thinking about kids and just their natural ability to be highly creative. And thinking about creativity and nature versus nurture. Is our creative thinking, is our creative ability nature? Are we born with it? Or is it nurture? Is it something that we learn? Now, I've talked about this many times on this show, but I've always talked about it kind of at a high level and, quite honestly, my personal opinion, just from my own observation. But this week, I wanted to dig a little deeper. I wanted to truly understand what past research has shown about this question of creative thinking, about it being nature or nurture. So that is the topic for this week's show. We're going to answer once and for all, is creative thinking something you're born with, part of your DNA, something that you get from your parents and your grandparents, or is this something you just naturally learn? So stay tuned. We're going to hop right into the segment. But before we go there, please subscribe and like. Tell others about the show. Help us spread the word. But you definitely want to subscribe so you don't miss any of the future episodes of the show. And with that, let's hop into this week's episode. Is creative thinking nature or nurture?
This episode is sponsored by Zoom. With Zoom, you can streamline your communication, collaboration, and creativity all in one place. Zoom is the market-leading platform that provides video meetings, voice, webinars, and chat across desktops, phones, tablets, and conference room systems. To learn more about Zoom and sign up for your free account, visit killerinnovations.com/Zoom.
Is creative thinking based on a born ability, or can you learn it like any other skill? Is it nature or nurture? Now, there's research that argues both cases, that it's a skill like a muscle that you can exercise and become proficient at. And there's others that just say, look, it's like a sport. Everybody can play basketball, but not everybody is a Michael Jordan. Now, I'm a believer that it's actually a little bit of both. And maybe not just a little bit, a lot of both. But I argue that we are all born highly, highly creative. We are born this way. The evidence being, look at children. In my case, look at my grandchildren. I see them using creative thinking and problem solving and make-believe and imagination each and every day. Now, my grandkids are still fairly young, the oldest being 9. So what happens? What is this transformation? Now, let me give you a little bit of insight in this transformation of children to adults. So in 1968, George Land tested 1,600 kids. He wanted to see what was this transformation that happened with kids. So he focused initially on 3 to 5-year-olds. And he used a creativity test developed by NASA. Now, this NASA test was used to identify highly creative engineers, problem solvers, thinkers. Keep in mind what was going on in the 1960s. It was about putting the man on the moon. We had to solve problems that we had just never contemplated. And NASA was trying to find a way of not just hiring engineers, but hiring creative thinkers, hiring problem solvers. So they had developed this test which had proven to be incredibly valuable for NASA to use in its recruiting process to select those that were going to be coming in and solving the really, really hard problems. Now, this test worked so well at NASA, Land says, well, let's try it on kids. Let's see. Can we identify even kids at an early age that are highly creative? And so he started this process, and he tested this over multiple years. He started with 3 to 5 year olds, and then he tested them when they turned 10, and then he tested them when they turned 15. And again, it's this test that was developed by NASA to identify people that had creative thinking skills. Now, the 5-year-olds, 98% of the kids did phenomenally well in this test, passed this test, would have been recruited by NASA, 98%. Now, when they did the test for 10-year-olds, same kids, when they turned 10, that number, 30%. That's right, it dropped from 98% to 30% just in 5 years. Now, again, testing those exact same kids when they turned 15, that number became 12%. So 5-year-olds, 98% passed this test, would have gotten recruited by NASA. At 10 years old, only 30%. At 15 years old, it became 12%. Now, I don't know about you, and I saw these numbers, but my mind just about exploded. I'm like, what is going on? Now, they've also taken this exact same test, and they've tested 280,000 adults. 280,000 adults. What do you think that number was? Keep in mind, 5-year-olds at 98, 10-year-olds at 30, 15-year-olds, 12%. What do you think the number was for the adults? That number was 2%. That's right, 2%. Only 2% of adults could pass this NASA creativity test. Now, when you go through the whole study and you read the research and you listen to George Land talk about this, and in fact, there's a great TEDx YouTube video of Land talking about this, and I'll put a link in the show notes. But Land said in the study that what he saw was non-creative behavior is learned. We start creative and we learn to be not creative, to unlearn our creativity over the years. Shocking, isn't it? Now, we talked about this before. I've shared the studies that have shown this in other research, etc. I've shared my own experience of going into kindergarten classes and first grade and second grade and third grade all the way up to 12th grade, and what I observed in my experience in working with kids in trying to unlock that natural creative ability. And I am a firm believer that we are all humans are born naturally creative. So the question is okay, if I'm learning non-creative behavior, what are those non-creative behaviors that I'm learning? Basically, it falls into two categories: rules and regulations. Keep in mind that the educational model that we operate in today was created in the Industrial Revolution. What was the purpose of schooling in the Industrial Revolution? The purpose of schooling, stated when public schools were established, was to produce good workers who followed instructions. So we are taught rules, regulations, follow the rules, do what I tell you to do, think the way I tell you to think. And that has just been perpetuated over the years. Now, that's the nature. So we start off highly creative, and on the nature side, we actually learn non-creative behavior. So the question is can you teach creative thinking? And I'm going to put an exclamation point on this. My answer is absolutely yes. You can teach, you can learn creative thinking. Now, here's my thoughts on teaching, learning creative thinking. One is that you cannot use traditional teaching methods like lecturing, reading, testing yourself for some kind of a certification, memorization. That will not work. And there are a lot of creative thinking courses that are out there that I would call very traditional. Talking head on a YouTube video, going into a course, a one-day course, having some quote guru standing up on stage. That will not work. Using traditional teaching methods will not work. And what I'm going to explain to you is how I think about learning, or in my case, teaching creative thinking skills. First is you have to unlearn rather than a learning process. This is about how do you break old habits, break old patterns. So this isn't a traditional teaching method of, run through 12 sequences of videos and listen. You've got to create the environment. You've got to create and break the history, break the old way of thinking, break the old muscle memory, and create new muscle memory. And the way to do that is through intensity. Intensity creates new muscle memory. Intensity of training. If you're going to train to be a marathon runner, if you want to go over long distances and you want to be able to complete a marathon, you've got to have some intense training. You're teaching new muscle memory. You're teaching your legs. You're teaching your breathing. You're teaching even your mind on being psychologically ready. It is that level of intensity. You also have to get people out of the comfort zone. We all naturally have our comfort zone. Things that we just feel much more comfortable in doing, don't want to have that stress, don't want to have that fear. We fall into our comfort zone. You have to create an environment. If you're going to learn creative thinking skills, if you're going to go from being that 2% as an adult and go back and find that 98% of children level of creativity, you have to get out of that comfort zone. And part of that is building humility. I run into this so many times where people will come into one of my courses and they've got the ego. They've got I'm a C-level exec and I've had career success. And so therefore I know this, and I don't want to be put in a position where I'm going to be embarrassed in front of maybe people who work for me or people who work for somebody who works for me. The ego piece is one of the biggest barriers most leaders have when trying to rediscover that ability to access their creative thinking. So again, you have to unlearn. It's an unlearning process rather than a learning process. So, how do you do this? Well, you don't learn to be creative. It's not about learning about theoreticals about what creative people do and how they do it. It is about being creative, becoming that creative person. Take U.S. Marines. My wife's side of the family, very, very military focused. Marine, two in the Air Force. On my case side, my dad was Navy. My uncle was 101st Airborne Army, Vietnam. You don't become a soldier. You do not become a Marine by reading a book. You become a Marine by going through boot camp, by having that intense experience. It's not about learning to become a Marine. You become a Marine. This isn't about learning to be creative. It's about being creative. And you have to have that experience. You have to create that environment if you are going to teach Or if you want to learn, if you are not willing to sign up for this level of intensity, then forget it. You are going to be just a peripheral level creative thinker. It requires this level of intensity. And it requires various challenges and tests, forcing people out of their comfort zone, putting them in unfamiliar environments, stressing them, testing their leadership, testing their ability to problem solve. You, through this boot camp experience, like the Marine Corps, where they put them through obstacle courses and they stress their bodies and they do long marches and they have to solve problems as teams. They have to support each other, right? Think about the military model and how do you apply that to teaching and learning creative thinking skills. And then ultimately is you need to hang out with creatives. Have you ever noticed when people find out that someone is an ex-military, like an ex-Marine, they can look at each other, they know exactly what each other went through to get there, and they have that experience. They have that level of understanding. You're a Marine, I'm a Marine, I'm an ex-Marine. I know what you went through. You passed that test. You are a brother or a sister. We are one. And one Marine asking another Marine for help, there is no question asked, they will help each other. Innovation, creative thinkers, that is the same. Hanging out with other creatives, particularly creatives that have gone through that intensity, that have gone through that learning. It's about creating a community. Now, in one of the courses that I teach, which is called the Innovation Bootcamp, at the end of the course, for those that complete the course, they get a call sign. And the call sign, there's a lot of thought applied to that, but it's to reinforce that this call sign signifies that experience they went through, that they've had some form of an achievement. And they're actually given a little symbol that they can wear on their badge, their lanyard, the collar of their jackets, wherever. And when we go to conferences and that, we run into others that have gone through one of my courses that have these symbols on, you can see the people looking at each other and they go, I know what you went through. I know your skill and ability. I know you passed that test. I know that you've achieved this. And that is very, very meaningful. And it creates this community effect. Now, today we have maybe a slightly different variation of that, of what we call the Innovators Community. It's a free community. It's for innovators to kind of come hang out. Not everybody in the community has gone through one of my courses, but it is that people that have gone through and who've been innovators, who've created great products and services, who've shown their creative thinking skills, but being part of a community, whether it's the innovators community or some other community, that is important. And then at the end, ultimately at the end, is giving people the permission to apply what they've learned, to experiment, and to be wrong, to fail, to stumble. Look, why are 98% of 3 to 5-year-olds being able to pass the NASA test? Because they're not trying to figure out what the right answer is. Because there is no right answer when it comes to creative thinking. It's about trying a variety of different things and not self-checking yourself and saying, oh, I'm not going to put that answer down because that's crazy or that will be embarrassing if someone reads it, right? 3 to 5-year-olds have no filters. They don't check themselves. They don't edit themselves. Ultimately, if you've gone through this intense environment, if you've unlearned the bad behavior that puts you in that 2% and tries to move you back to that 98%, you have to give yourself that permission to experiment and to be wrong. Think like a 3-year-old. If you don't know what a 3-year-old thinks like, go hang out with a bunch of 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds. Preschool, kindergarten age. They have no filters. They will show you anything. They will create artwork that you look at and you go, wow, if I showed that to anybody, I'd be embarrassed. No, they don't care, and they're thrilled with it. How do you get yourself back to that 98% of 3 to 5-year-olds who could pass the NASA creativity test? So let me give you a little bit of insight of my Innovation Bootcamp course that I teach. Now, I think we just completed number 17, number 18, number 18. So I don't teach this very often. It's once or twice a year. Most times it's closed, meaning we limit it to certain people. Once about every 18 months to 2 years, we open it up to the public, where we might have a few seats and we'll just open up for people to be able to participate. It is 5 days. And it's 5 days where you're not able to kind of sneak off and do emails and check your phone. It's intense. We start at 8 a.m. and we're going to 8 or 9 p.m. every day for 5 days. Part of this is unlearning bad behavior, unlearning what we've trained ourselves about conformity, about rules, about assumptions, about regulations. We need to unlearn that. And part of this is this intense experience of unlearning. And it's about experiences rather than learning. Yeah, there's a little bit of lecture just to lay some framework, but it's about putting every one of the students into a very intense experience, starting with a blank sheet of paper on Monday and pitching a finished idea on Friday. And it's about building creative confidence. So by the end of day 5, you're not learning to be creative. You're not learning creative thinking skills. You are creative. And you've made a huge leap from that 2% back to the 3 to 5-year-olds of 98% of them being able to pass the NASA creativity test. It's about being creative and not just learning creativity. At the end of the day, at the end of that week, that's where we hand out the call signs, we hand out the symbols that people can wear, attach, promote that they have made it through boot camp and have unlearned that bad behavior, that uncreative behavior that we learn starting as soon as we get to 5 years old, 10 years old, 15-year-olds, and into adulthood, that blocks our ability to be creative, to use our creative thinking skills. So, if you're interested in more information about the Innovation Bootcamp, just drop me a note, phil@killerinnovations.com. I'll send that to you, or you can check it out over at Killer Innovations. Follow me on social media because I'll post about the bootcamp in the on my social media when a new course is coming up that is open to the public, or that course can be taught privately in the form of an organization or a team. So back to, is this nature or nurture? Do you learn creative thinking or are you born with it? Is it nature, meaning you're born as a creative thinker, or is it nurture? Is this something you learn? And the answer is yes. It is nature. You are born naturally creative. Unfortunately, the model of learning and work in today's world teaches us uncreative behaviors. So we start off highly creative. We learn bad behaviors. We turn off our creative thinking skills. But we can use the nurture. We can learn how to be creative thinkers. And it's not learning entirely new skills. It's refinding what we do naturally, what we were born with right from the very beginning. So it is yes, it is both. Creative thinking is both nature and nurture. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join me here. Really appreciate you taking the time to listen and to give your feedback. Got a couple of emails this last week. Those mean a lot. If there's a topic, a question, or something that wasn't clear in the show, please just drop me a note. We can chat about it, or I can update the show or produce a new show to give you the information that you would find useful. So do not be shy. Do not hesitate. Feel free to drop me an email. Best email address is phil@killerinnovations.com. So that email comes directly to me. It doesn't get bypassed, does not get read by anybody else. It comes directly to me. Now, we are coming up into March now. It is the start of season 17. Yes, we've completed 16 years of the show. We are now starting season 17. Hard to believe, isn't it? But all that great content, that great archive is all over at killerinnovations.com. You can get the show notes for today's shows with all the links, supporting materials, etc. Also, if you go up into the menu bar, you'll see the download button. Click the download button, put in your email address, and I'll send you an email with a ton of links in it to all kinds of supporting materials, such as gated funding models, examples, and PDF documents on how to run a brainstorming session, and including things like lean canvas for innovation. So how do you use a lean canvas as a one-page innovation plan around an idea? All of that is included in the download. So click the download button over on the page. So go over to killerinnovations.com. One favor I would ask, if you're getting a lot of enjoyment, if you're benefiting from the content that we share here on the show, I just have one ask. We do this for free. We give all this content away for free. Our only ask is for you to share it with others. Help me pay it forward. Years ago, after I've had some career success, I was spending some time with Bob Davis, my first mentor, and I asked him, how would I pay him back? How could I pay him back for everything that he had done for me in my career? And he laughed. He goes, you can't pay me back. You have to pay it forward. And that was the impetus for why we started this show back in March of 2005. And we've been doing it ever since. Now that we are in starting season 17, just wrapped up season 16. So we've been doing this for now over 16 years of producing this podcast. So all I ask is for you to share it with others. Post a comment, put a link up in your own social media, say something in your social media about the show. All of that we would greatly appreciate for helping us spread the word and expanding the subscriber base. So with that, I'm going to thank you again for taking the time out of your busy schedule to spend time with us here on the show. Look forward to hearing your feedback, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Podcasting nonstop since 2005, this has been the Killer Innovation Show on the Innovators Network.
This show is distributed by the Innovators Network. For more information and other great shows and content, visit theinnovators.network.